The question for today is based on the concept of a Jewish soul. Where does the idea of a Jewish soul come from? And furthermore, what is a Jewish soul? When did they start existing? And so I guess one would say that since we know there's Jewish food, there has to be a Jewish soul, right? So maybe it's when, as soon as kugel and rugelach, lox and bagels, gefilte fish, those gefilte fish in those jars, they seem like they last forever. So maybe when gefilte fish came, that's when Jewish souls came, right? Because only a Jewish soul could love that gefilte fish. You know what I'm talking about? The one that has this slimy stuff that you think you're in a science fiction movie, but it's just gefilte fish? Okay, that's the one I'm talking about. So, enough with the jokes, if you call those jokes. No one here was laughing, so any of you guys listening at home, feel free not to laugh at those, but try to laugh with me, I guess, when a good one comes up. The Jewish soul. I must share with you a personal experience. Call it a story. I may have dreamed it, but it actually did happen. I was at a Shabbaton. What's a Shabbaton? A Shabbaton is an opportunity to invite, in this particular case, it was a Kiruv Shabbaton, so some less affiliated Jews that came to partake of a Friday night festive meal on their way to and from the nightclubs and from work and from wherever they were going. They weren't religious at all, but they decided, since there was a lot of Jewish people in the area, they decided to come and join us for a nice festive Friday night meal. And the visiting rabbi got up and spoke about the concept of a Jewish soul and its uniqueness and its importance and why it makes the people sitting around in the room have a special connection. Now, one of the boys, I guess men in the audience, we were actually men by then, I know him from like third grade, so we were boys when we met. One of them, after his talk, came up to me. He was someone very smart, someone that pursued the study of world religions, a very, very, intelligent and sophisticated person. So he came up to me and he belittled the talk from the rabbi. Jewish soul. To him, it was comical. Comical, the term Jewish soul. Like what? There's an Italian soul and a Jewish soul and a, American soul. I mean, I guess we all could agree there's no such thing as American soul. What's America anyway? I mean, America is really just a result of many other places. If there would be an American soul, what would be its representative? If the American soul. Cheeseburgers, excellent. What about pizza? That's from Italy. French fries, that's from France. I guess if French fries actually are from France, who knows? Anyway, I thought about his response. And in the end, I said, you know what? I agree. I agree with him. It does sound trivial. If you're coming from where he's coming from, I think I would also agree that it sounds trivial. Related to this topic of the Jewish soul, as trivial as it may sound to anyone listening to this, depending on where this is going to circulate, is a related concept is marrying Jewish. Marrying Jewish, a big talk in the Jewish world at least. I mean, I guess there are other communities that talk about it because someone's marrying these Jewish people that are not Jewish. So there's marrying Jewish, goes both ways. There's the concept of Jew marrying Jew, and then there's the non-Jew marrying a Jew. And of course, the Jew marrying a non-Jew. I mean, who cares? Right? Who cares? Right? Let live and let live. Isn't love what it's all about, There are many people out there that are set on marrying Jewish because they have a connection with their Jewish heritage. They recognize there's something valuable there. Many Jews are connected with the land of Israel. They may come to Israel. That may strengthen their connection. And they have this resolve to marry Jewish until, you know when? Until a girl they're dating or a boy they're dating goes a bit beyond a regular date and they fall in love. And then they're stuck. Because then it's all complicated. Because then all those plans of marrying Jewish go out the window. You were committed, but at the end of the day, when you love someone, when you're living with someone and your life is just becoming one life, the two of you connect. It's impossible to tear that apart. So then it all goes out the window. I've seen many friends have gone down that road. Now, back to my original question. Who cares? Why is it so important to marry a Jewish person? Is it just so that our country should survive? Sure, so we should have Jewish customs? Is it so we should jump up and down when we're supposed to? Have that gefilte fish I mentioned? Who cares if we really marry Jewish? Again, all this sounds very trivial to my friend. And at one point in my life, also, I have to admit, maybe it didn't sound as trivial, but I definitely questioned these concepts, because when you have no connection with Torah, and more so, you have no connection with your soul and what a soul is and what God really is, then none of this really matters. If it's only because your mother's yelling at you, you better marry a Jewish girl, or you better marry a Jewish husband, how far can that take you? In the end, life is much more grabbing than an annoying parent that doesn't want to let you go. So life is what grabs you in the end. And if you're going to go out and enjoy life and mingle, 99.9% of the people out there are not Jewish. So if you're going to be open to the world around you, which is what most people are going to be in university, at work, traveling, anywhere. So the chances are you're going to wind up with someone that's not Jewish. So is it worth all this work to fight against it and to protect against it? So let's get started. And I'm going to take an extreme example, and in the end, hopefully we'll see that that's not so extreme, or maybe it is extreme, but it just happens to be true. There's nothing wrong with extremism if it's true, right? So let's get started. You ever play that game when you were little? You have all of the different shapes and you fit them in the right spot? Well, imagine taking a circle and trying to squeeze it into the space that was made for a square. It's never going to go, right? Can you ever get that circle in a square? I mean, you could, if you ruin the place you're putting it in, you can maybe, if you have a hammer, you can get it in, but the circles are not meant to go in the square, and vice versa. The square is not meant for the circle. So it's that simple. It's that simple to say, but to accept such a statement is, I think you have better luck at the casino. That roulette or the lottery. You'll win the lottery before you can get a person to say, oh, really? I didn't know, Rabbi. Okay, great. You solved all my problems. However, in reality, and even more so, a Jew marrying a non-Jew is like trying to get that circle into a square. So let's start. It's true, God created everything that exists in the world. He created everyone. But He did not create us all identical. We're not all the same. We can appreciate there are different types of creations. However, when it comes to the human race, so we all kind of look the same to some degree. We are, in that sense, all equal as we're all humans. There's a Gemara that even says that is someone else's blood more red than yours? We cannot choose one life over another because all blood is the same. We all have an equal value in essential life. So that should be all human beings. We're all human. We're all the same. That's how it appears. And it was meant to appear that way. There's a prohibition on killing all humans. There's no distinction in that sense. All humans, you're not allowed to kill any human being. So let's start with the soul. Because if we start with the soul, and we start with the spiritual world that God created before this one, we could start to understand that world and the soul, and we can then start to understand this world, which is really only a physical manifestation of the spiritual worlds above. So if we had eyes to see what is above, we would see this. Above, there is a realm called holiness. There's a place of holiness. There are worlds and manifestations in that area above. Spiritual place, it's not a physical place, called holiness. And then there are realms, worlds that Hashem created, which are external to this place of holiness. These external worlds have within themselves different levels. There's a level that is what we would call, for the most part, a neutral level. It's not holy, it's not evil, it's a mixture of both good and evil, and it's what we call a neutral realm. called in Hebrew Kabbalah talk klipat noga. Below that, or beyond that, there's what we call 3 unclean, impure klipot. It's a realm. There are 3 kind of divisions to it, parts to it. What we call an unholy realm, an impure realm. Now, souls come from either the realm of holiness or they come from this place outside of holiness. That's where all of the different souls come from. And it's because there are souls that are holy and souls that are not holy. That's why we have in this world the Jewish people and the rest of the nations. However, in the beginning, the original potential plan would have existed without the distinction of 70 nations. One of the greatest Kabbalists, Rabbi Isaac Luria, the Arizal, known as the Arizal, teaches that until Abraham, there was not yet going to be one nation that would be unique and set aside, and 70 other nations that would be set aside. It wouldn't be this division of 1 and 70, because originally it would have been one universal nation. But the world kept on falling, kept on failing. The first 3 tests, main tests that we faced, was the test of course, Adam and Eve. We failed that one. And then there was the generation of the flood, where the world was quite corrupt. We failed that one. Then there was the generation of the Pelaga, where the world was dispersed into different parts of the world, and the languages were changed, and that's where we begin 70 different nations. And then the final story we see in the Bible talks about a very odd place. I think if you want to travel around the world, you'll come to many cities that resemble this place. This place was called Sodom and Gomorrah, and the place was destroyed by God. A place so evil, so perverted and perverse in its ways, that God decided to wipe it out, beyond fixing, so to speak. That's Sodom and Gomorrah. And unfortunately, today you can find remnants of this place. Go to Las Vegas, go to LA, go to Manhattan, go to Paris. You'll find Sodom and Gomorrah. You will also find the decent people that are living a life that they're trying their best with what they know and what they can understand to be good people, to believe in God, to serve God. But you'll find Sodom and Gomorrah also. So, although God destroyed the place, the spirit is still alive. Anyway, so after these generations, finally, there is a story of Jacob and his 12 sons coming down to Egypt, leaving Israel and going to Egypt. And in Egypt, the tribes of Israel, the 12 tribes, give birth to children, and they stay there for about 210 years, and a whole nation grows. The nation of Israel is developed in Egypt. It's very ironic that the nation of Israel was originally born in Egypt. But that's the story, that in Egypt, the nation of Israel grew and developed and left Egypt and stood at Mount Sinai and was born as the Jewish people. That's where the Jewish people come from. Mount Sinai is when we officially became that nation empowered by God. And that's when things changed. Where there's no argument that we are all officially Jewish at that point. There's discussions of how Jewish we were before then. But in reality, the holy souls that are made up of the Jewish people began with Adam and kept coming into the world. And it's actually the story of those very souls that is the story we're told about in the flood, in the diaspora, and in Sodom and Gomorrah. And eventually those souls are born in Mitzrayim and come out and become the Jewish people. Once that happens, once the Jewish nation is chosen to be the conduit that these holy souls will come into the world through being born by a Jewish mother, then we have now these 70 nations that will not have that quality. They do not have that quality of having this holiness intrinsic to their soul. That's a reality according to the truth of Torah, according to Kabbalah, according to the tradition that we have from Moses, going all the way back to Abraham and all the way back to Adam. Adam had this holy soul. He lost it, parts of it, when he sinned. There were several righteous people that lived between Adam and Abraham that also carried on this soul. But it was through Abraham's unbelievable work in dedicating his life to God and dedicating his life that the world should know about God and come to serve him, that him and his descendants were chosen to be a light unto the nations and to be this nation that are kings and priests for God. So, coming back to our original questions, why is it so important to marry Jewish? Why is it so important to be Jewish? Why are we still here, defying all laws of logic? Like, it's a miracle that we exist. There's many proofs for that. And so the answer is ultimately because the story of the Jewish people is a story of creation, story of soul. A soul and a body of souls that are really one soul that God imagined before he created the world, saying, I want to create a world with these people, these souls existing, serving God, doing the mitzvot for God. And there's another level of also souls that God created because he wanted to, and that's the rest of the nations, that he also wants to serve them in a slightly different way. We have 7 commandments that obviously can be interpreted and explained and expanded to many mitzvahs given to the nations of the world. And they have their place in the big picture of God's world, and they have their role. And we have our place and our role. And ultimately, we're all here to serve God. So the idea of not being happy with what God created you to be and with the portion God chose to give you is haughtiness, is ignorance. And that's what's stopping us all to just get past the negative aspect of such an idea and embracing, it's about not being what God didn't make you to be. Be happy with who you are and what you are and what you have, because it's God-given and God knows best. And of course, we also have to mature. Jews and non-Jews alike have to mature and accept their place in God's world. And when we all do that, there'll be peace in the world. And the nation of Israel will have its place at the center and be a light unto nations and a nation of priests doing a unique service that only we can do. And the rest of the world will do their service and contribute what they have and what only they can do. And ultimately, we can only be, and all we really would want to be if we were smart enough and wise enough, is to be what God wants us to be and what God created us to be. And so ultimately, let's address this other aspect of what we talked about today. Let's address also the idea of marriage and realize that the circle and the square is real. This melting pot theory that we see in America and other countries in what we call the westernized or Western civilization, it's a fallacy. We're not all meant to be one. There's a diversity within the unity. We're meant to be what we are, who we are, and ultimately be united. But we're not meant to be one. God made 70 nations, and God made one unique nation from the descendants of Abraham. And we have to recognize, accept, and stand up for that responsibility and purpose. When Jews will stop hating themselves for being chosen and start living up to what they were chosen for, we'll earn everyone's respect. And we'll respect them back, and we'll each do our part in this perfect world that we're waiting to see, Be'ezrat Hashem.